The annual International Martial Arts Expo was buzzing with energy, crowds pouring in, cameras flashing, and tournament rings echoing with the sounds of practice strikes. Fans from around the world had gathered to see legends, newcomers, and icons of different fighting styles under one massive roof. Steven Seagal arrived quietly, almost unnoticed at first. Dressed in his signature black robe-style jacket and tinted glasses, he walked with slow, steady confidence. He wasn't there to show off. He wasn't there to dominate. He was simply attending the expo as a guest of honor, shaking hands, greeting old friends, and offering respectful nods to new faces who admired him. On the other side of the hall, the atmosphere changed. Yeung, muscular, loud, and larger than life, made his entrance like a storm. Every step felt like thunder. Fans rushed toward him, shouting his name, asking for autographs. Bolo soaked it all in, flexing and posing with a smirk that radiated pure dominance. To him, martial arts was a display of raw power. And today, he wanted everyone to know he was still the strongest presence in the building. Then Bolo's eyes landed on Steven. He paused, then grinned. To Bolo, Steven looked calm, too calm, maybe even fragile, maybe past his prime. And in Bolo's mind, that made him the perfect target for a public challenge. He marched toward Steven with heavy, deliberate footsteps. The crowd sensed something and began forming a circle. Bolo's voice boomed through the hall. "So this is the famous Steven Seagal? I expected someone tougher." People gasped. Cameras lifted instantly. Steven turned slowly, his expression unreadable. He didn't flinch, didn't rise to the insult. He simply looked at Be on the Lookout with quiet eyes, eyes of someone who had seen a lifetime of fights and no longer needed to prove anything. Bolo, fueled by ego, stepped closer. "I'm challenging you, in front of everyone. Right now." A ripple of excitement moved through the crowd. Some were shocked. Others whispered warnings. "Why is Bolo doing this? He doesn't know what he's starting." Steven's silence only made the tension sharper. He didn't respond. He didn't posture. He just breathed, slow and steady, unmoved by the chaos around him. And that silence, that stillness, made the entire arena lean in, waiting for what would happen next. What Steven did next made the crowd gasp. No one expected it. The challenge hung in the air like a spark waiting to ignite. Spectators pushed in closer, forming a tight circle around the two legends. Dozens of phones lifted simultaneously, their lenses locked on the moment. Everyone sensed something big was coming, but no one knew just how big. Yeung squared his shoulders, puffing out his chest like a bull preparing to charge. His voice thundered again, echoing across the hall. "Well, are you scared, Seagal? Or are you finally going to show the world what you really are?" Steven Seagal didn't move. He didn't blink. He didn't even acknowledge the insult. He simply looked at Bolo with the calmness of someone who had mastered not only martial arts, but also his own emotions. This silence, this control, infuriated Bolo. He took a step forward, deliberately crossing into Steven's space. "You're supposed to be a legend, right?" Bolo barked. "Then prove it. Show everyone you're not just a Hollywood myth." A few spectators laughed nervously, unsure whether Bolo was joking or dead serious. But the tension in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw, and the fire in his eyes made it clear. He meant every word. Steven breathed slowly. Then, in a low, steady voice, he replied, "Respect is earned, not screamed across a room." The crowd reacted instantly, gasps, murmurs, and even a few cheers. That single sentence hit Bolo harder than a punch. His face tightened with irritation, feeling as if Steven had publicly dismissed him. "You think you're above me?" Bolo snarled. "You think you're better than my style, my strength?" Steven didn't answer. He didn't need to. His stillness was louder than Bolo's shouting. And that silence burned Bolo's ego. So Bolo escalated. He reached out and pushed Steven's shoulder, not enough to hurt him, but enough to provoke a reaction. The push echoed louder than any shout. The audience inhaled sharply, every phone now zoomed in. Security guards standing near the stage flinched, ready to intervene, but Stephen lifted his hand ever so slightly, a silent message. Don't. He wasn't threatened. He wasn't shaken. He wasn't even annoyed. Stephen simply shifted his stance, grounding himself like a mountain. His posture said everything. If I respond, it will be on my terms, not yours. But Bolo wasn't done. You're a coward hiding behind calmness, he growled. Fight me. Let's give these people a real show. Stephen slowly removed his sunglasses, revealing sharp, focused eyes that pierced straight through Bo. I don't fight for show, Stephen said, his voice deep and controlled. I fight when there is no other choice. The crowd grew electric. Even the people who had originally supported Bolo now felt the shift. Stephen wasn't avoiding confrontation. He was simply choosing the right moment. Bo laughed mockingly, raising his arms to hype the crowd. You all heard him. He's scared. Afraid to be exposed. But the audience wasn't convinced. Some shook their heads. Some whispered. He doesn't understand who he's provoking. Seagal's patience is running out. Still, Stephen remained composed, hands relaxed at his sides. Bo got in his face again. Last chance, Seagal. Fight me, unless you want everyone to see you backing down. Stephen leaned in slightly, his voice so soft only those closest could hear. You mistake silence for fear. Then he stepped back, not retreating, but preparing. Positioning himself. Centering himself. Something had changed. A shift in the air. A storm forming behind Stephen's calm eyes. Everyone watching felt it. Something was about to happen. Something Yeung was not ready for. The hall fell into a strange, electric silence. Even the background noise of the expo, the chatter, the demonstrations, the clanking of metal, seemed to fade as every eye locked onto the center of the circle. Yeung stood with his muscles tense like a coiled spring, breathing heavily through his nose as if preparing for a battle he believed he had already won. Steven Seagal, however, remained perfectly still. He stood as if rooted to the floor, shoulders relaxed, hands open, his breathing controlled and even. Anyone who truly understood martial arts could feel it. He wasn't frozen, he was anchored. Grounded. Waiting. But Bolo didn't see mastery. He only saw stillness, and mistook it for weakness. Determined to show the crowd that Seagal was all talk, Bolo stepped backward dramatically, giving himself space. Then he launched into a loud, powerful series of air punches and kicks, each movement intentionally explosive, designed to impress the spectators and intimidate Stephen. The crowd reacted with a mix of awe and fear. Some cheered. Some gasped. Some backed up instinctively, sensing the aggression building. Bo finished his display by slamming his fist into his palm, the loud crack echoing across the hall. That, he declared, is real power. That's what a true fighter looks like. Stephen didn't blink. Didn't move. Didn't even raise an eyebrow. His lack of reaction frustrated Bo more than insults ever could. Stephen's calmness, his refusal to feed Bolo's ego, felt like a personal attack. Say something, Bolo demanded. Or are you just hoping I'll get bored and walk away? Bo took another step forward, closing the distance again, his heavy footsteps vibrating the floor. From behind Stephen, a worried voice called out. Stephen, maybe just step aside. It was a friend, someone who could feel where this confrontation was heading. But Stephen gently raised one hand without turning around, silencing him. He didn't need protection. He didn't need advice. He simply needed Bolo to reveal exactly how far he was willing to go. Across the ring of spectators, another voice whispered anxiously. Why isn't he defending himself? What is he waiting for? Stephen's stillness created fear, not for himself, but for what would happen once he finally chose to move. And Bolo, blinded by arrogance, had no idea. He stepped even closer, now just inches from Stephen's face. His breath was hot with anger. His jaw clenched. His fists ready. You think you're better than me? Bolo growled. You think your calmness makes you superior? Stephen's reply was soft, but sharp enough to cut through the tension. Control isn't superiority. It's discipline. The crowd murmured again. Bolo's eyes widened, furious. "You're mocking me," he snapped. "You think I don't have discipline?" Steven's eyes remained steady. "I think you've forgotten what martial arts is about." Bolo's fury cracked like lightning. With a roar, he took a half-step back, lowering his stance into a powerful ready position. The air itself seemed to thicken as everyone realized. This was about to turn real. Steven's friends once again tried to intervene. "Steven, just walk away. He's trying to set you up." But Steven never moved his gaze from Bo. His voice was low, but unshakable. "I know." He knew exactly what Bo was doing. He knew Bolo wanted to bait him into a sloppy reaction. He knew Bolo was fighting from ego, not mastery. And Steven was waiting for the right moment, not the loud moment. The crowd watched with bated breath as Bolo continued pacing, cracking his neck and rolling his shoulders. He wanted to intimidate, dominate, overwhelm. He wanted Steven to flinch, react, defend, anything. But Steven didn't. And that terrified Bo more than he would ever admit. "Let's go!" Bolo shouted. "Fight!" Steven finally shifted his foot, barely an inch. But that inch felt like thunder. It wasn't aggression. It wasn't fear. It was preparation. Steven Seagal had just decided something. He wasn't walking away. Not anymore. Because this wasn't just a challenge. It was disrespect. To him. To his art. To every martial artist who believed discipline mattered more than showmanship. As Bolo squared up, the crowd parted slightly. Steven's stance lowered just enough to indicate readiness, but not enough to appear threatening. And that was the moment people realized. Steven Seagal wasn't refusing the fight. He was choosing when it would begin. Bolo clenched his fists, teeth grinding, preparing to strike first. The tension hit its peak. Everyone in the arena leaned forward. This was it. The first move was about to be made. And when it happened, it would change everything. The circle around them grew tighter, thicker, almost suffocating with anticipation. Yeung's powerful stance dominated one side of the ring, while Steven Seagal remained still as a stone, hands relaxed, posture calm, breath steady. The crowd sensed a storm brewing, but they didn't yet understand its size. That understanding came from the fringes. Near the back of the crowd, a middle-aged man wearing a vintage Aikido jacket squinted toward Steven, his face tightening with recognition. He whispered to the woman beside him. "That stance, do you see it? That's not fear. That's grounding. That's Aikido at its highest level." The woman blinked, surprised. "You mean, he's actually preparing?" The man nodded slowly, excitement building in his eyes. Not preparing, controlling the space. Word began to ripple from one spectator to another. First quietly, then louder still. "That's Steven Seagal. The real Steven Seagal. The 7th Dan black belt. He trained law enforcement for years. He's not just an actor. He's the real deal." But Yeung remained oblivious. He was pacing like a predator, flexing his arms, rolling his shoulders, feeding off the cheers of those who didn't yet understand what was happening. His arrogance blinded him. He believed the crowd was on his side, admiring his strength, celebrating his dominance. What he didn't realize was that the crowd's energy was shifting. And they were shifting toward Steven. Another voice cut through the murmur. "Look at his feet. Steven hasn't moved more than an inch since the beginning. That's insane focus." A younger martial artist chimed in. "That's Aikido mastery. He's waiting for Bolo to overcommit. When he does, it'll be over in seconds." The whispers spread like wildfire. Phones zoomed in. Cameras tilted. Eyes widened. But Steven himself did not react to any of it. He never looked at the fans. He never looked at the cameras. He never even acknowledged the growing realization around him. His humility, his refusal to use fame or skill as a shield, made the moment even more powerful. Meanwhile, Bolo misread the whispers entirely. He thought the crowd was chanting for him. He thought the rising energy was excitement for his show. He thought Steven's silence meant defeat. He smirked confidently, pointing a thick finger toward Steven. "You see that?" he barked. "Everyone is watching. They want you to fight. They want you to prove yourself. But the truth was the opposite. They weren't watching Steven because they wanted to see him prove himself. They were watching because they already knew who he was. Beyond the Lookout just hadn't figured it out. A martial arts historian suddenly shouted from behind the barricade. Bolo, you're challenging a master of redirection. You can't overpower someone like that. You're playing his game. But Bolo didn't hear. Or maybe he didn't want to. He was lost in ego. He stepped forward again, closing the gap until he was only a foot away from Steven. He puffed his chest and snarled. How long do you think you can hide behind your silence? Say something. Show something. Fight. Steven looked at him for the first time in minutes. Not angrily. Not fearfully. Just with a calm, steady gaze that reflected decades of discipline and spiritual balance. You're not listening, Steven said softly. Not to me. Not to the crowd. Not even to yourself. The words struck harder than any punch. For a moment, even Beyond the Lookout hesitated. Because Steven's voice carried weight, not volume, but depth. And everyone felt it. The crowd murmured again. That's what a real master sounds like. He's not here to fight. He's here to teach. Bolo's digging his own grave. Bolo's frustration grew. He clenched his fists, his breathing heavier now, not from exhaustion, but from confusion. Steven's calm was too foreign, too intimidating, too controlled. Stop talking in riddles. Bolo snapped. Fight me like a man. Steven gently raised his chin, studying him. I will respond, he said, when your actions require it. Not when your ego demands it. Gasps echoed across the room. Bolo's face reddened with rage. You think you're better than me, he roared. Steven shook his head. No. I think you're fighting the wrong opponent. Your enemy is your ego. The arena fell silent. Completely silent. Even Bolo didn't move. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. And Steven saw it. The cracks. The insecurity. The fear behind the bravado. The crowd felt it too. They leaned in. Phones steadied. Whispers died. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a lesson. A shift. A point of no return. Bo stepped back, breathing hard, trying to shake off the sudden doubt. But it was too late. The atmosphere had changed. This was no longer Bolo's stage. It was Steven's arena. And everyone watching knew. The moment of truth was closer than ever. One wrong move from Beyond the Lookout, and the world would see exactly what Steven Seagal was capable of. The air inside the expo hall felt heavier now, as if the tension itself had gained weight. Yeung's breathing grew louder, harsher, echoing through the silent circle of spectators. His muscles flexed with every inhale, but something in his posture had shifted. Confidence was still there, yes, but so was doubt. A crack. A hesitation. Steven Seagal, meanwhile, hadn't moved more than a breath. His calmness was unnerving. His stillness, terrifying. His silence, powerful. And that power finally pushed Bolo over the edge. With a frustrated roar, Bo lunged forward, not a full attack, but a sharp, aggressive shove meant to knock Steven off balance. The crowd gasped, expecting a collision. But Steven didn't budge. He simply absorbed the shove with a slight shift of his weight, redirecting the force as if it were nothing more than a gust of wind. Bo stumbled half a step sideways, shocked that someone who looked so effortless could withstand such force. Whispers spread rapidly. He didn't even move. He redirected it. That wasn't luck. That was skill. Bolo's embarrassment burned across his face. You think that was something? He spat, forcing a laugh. You think you're untouchable? Steven remained silent. It was the silence that ate Beyond the Lookout alive. He struck again, this time a swift grab toward Steven's wrist, intending to yank him forward. But Steven's arm flowed like water. Instead of resisting, he gently redirected Bolo's grip with a subtle turn of his wrist. Bolo lost balance again. He caught himself before falling, but his eyes widened, realizing something was terribly wrong. Steven wasn't just avoiding the attacks. He was guiding them, reading them. Controlling them. Just as Bolo opened his mouth to speak, Stephen finally stepped forward, no more than half a foot, but enough to shift the entire momentum of the room. His voice dropped, steady and cold. Strength without discipline leads only to chaos. The words sliced through Bolo like a blade. The crowd reacted instantly, some gasping, some covering their mouths, others whispering to their phones as they recorded. Stephen lifted his hand, not in a strike, but as a gesture of clarity. "You're attacking the world," he said calmly. "But the world isn't your enemy." Bolo clenched his jaw. "You're mocking me," he growled. Stephen shook his head slowly. "No. I'm giving you a chance to stop." The humility in Stephen's voice enraged beyond the lookout further. This was supposed to be his moment of dominance, his public display of strength. But somehow, Stephen had flipped the energy entirely without throwing a single punch. Determined to reclaim control, Bolo roared and swung a heavy punch, powerful, fast, and fueled by pride. The crowd screamed. But Stephen didn't block it. He didn't dodge it. He redirected it. With a soft, fluid circular motion, Stephen caught Bolo's wrist and guided the punch past his own body, sending Bolo stumbling forward, nearly falling onto the mat. The audience exploded in disbelief. "That's Aikido. That's mastery." He used Bolo's strength against him. Bolo turned back, panting, sweat beading across his forehead. He had never been handled like this. Not by men his own size, not by champions, not even in training. Stephen stepped closer, his voice low enough that only those nearest could hear. "You confuse aggression with skill. They are not the same." Bolo froze. Stephen's calmness, his precision, his control, it was too much. Bolo's confidence wavered, his breathing ragged as he tried to mentally regroup. But Stephen wasn't done. For the first time, he shifted into a ready stance, not tense, not aggressive, but perfectly balanced. A stance that spoke decades of training, discipline, and mastery. The crowd felt the shift instantly. Phones rose higher. Hearts pounded. Even the air felt colder. Stephen lifted his chin, his eyes locked on Bolo. "You asked for a fight," he said quietly. "But you never understood what a fight truly is." Bolo swallowed hard. His bravado faded. His muscles tightened with uncertainty. Stephen continued. "It's not about proving you're strong. It's about proving you have control." Bolo's face tightened with humiliation. "Stop lecturing me," he snapped. "Fight me." Stephen's expression didn't change. He spoke the final line like a judgment. "You're already fighting. But the enemy you think is me, is your own pride." The spectators erupted into murmurs again. Some nodded, others recorded the moment in stunned awe. Bolo felt cornered, not physically, but emotionally. Every attack he attempted had failed. Every display of strength had been neutralized. Stephen had defeated him without even striking. And the worst part? The crowd had seen everything. Their faith in Bolo's dominance shattered. Their belief in Stephen's quiet mastery solidified. Bolo stepped back, panting, trying to shake the growing panic in his chest. But everyone watching knew. Seagal had just taken control of the fight. And Yeung was running out of time. The expo hall felt like it was holding its breath. Yeung stood across from Seagal, sweat dripping down his temples, chest rising and falling in uneven waves. His confidence, once loud, aggressive, overpowering, was now visibly crumbling. Every failed shove, every redirected strike, every effortless deflection had eaten away at the image he had tried so hard to project. But Stephen stood exactly where he had begun. Calm. Grounded. Untouched. The stillness wasn't weakness. It was dominance. And now, everyone could feel it. A soft ripple passed through the audience as a group of older martial artists pushed their way to the front. One of them, a respected Aikido instructor with decades of experience, raised his voice above the murmurs. "Stop the cameras. Stop the shouting. Understand what you're witnessing." People turned. Phones lowered slightly. The atmosphere shifted again. The instructor pointed at Stephen, awe in his eyes. "That man isn't avoiding fight. He is the fight. He's controlling the flow, the space, the timing, everything." Another martial artist chimed in, his voice loud enough to echo. You challenged a master of redirection, Bo. Pure force means nothing to him. You might as well be punching the wind. The crowd erupted into whispers, some excited, some stunned. That's why Steven hasn't struck back. He doesn't need to. He's using Bolo's strength against him. Bolo's face burned with humiliation. He clenched his fists again, ready to lunge, ready to reclaim even a shred of the pride he had lost. But before he could move, another voice thundered across the hall. Stop! The crowd parted instantly. A high-ranking MMA coach, a legend in the fighting world, stepped forward with urgency in his stride and shock in his expression. He pointed directly at Steven Seagal. That man trained federal agents, military units, special forces. He's not just some actor you can push around. He's a 7th-degree black belt who mastered Aikido techniques most people can't even comprehend. Gasps exploded across the spectators. Someone shouted, You didn't tell me this was Steven Seagal. He's a real martial artist, Bolo. You can't touch him. Bro, you messed up. The energy burst like electricity. Bolo froze. A chill ran down his spine as if reality had finally crashed through his ego. He looked at Steven, really looked, and for the first time, he didn't see a quiet man avoiding conflict. He saw a storm waiting behind a locked door. A storm Steven controlled perfectly. Bolo's voice wavered. So, you're saying all of this is real? Steven didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply nodded once. Every movement has purpose. Every breath has focus. You attacked without understanding either. Bo took a shaky step backward, his eyes widening. You could have hurt me any time you wanted. Steven tilted his head slightly. If I wished to, you wouldn't be standing right now. The hall erupted in reactions. Oh my God! He said it. This is over. Bolo's done. That was not a threat, that was fact. Bolo's bravado cracked completely. He lowered his hands slowly, shame creeping into his expression. But why? He asked, voice trembling. Why didn't you fight back? Why didn't you show your power? Steven's reply was soft, almost compassionate. Because fighting isn't about proving you're strong. It's about protecting peace. You gave me no reason to destroy you. Bo swallowed hard. His throat felt dry, his pride collapsing like a tower of sand. Another officer, a security member from the expo, rushed into the circle. His eyes widened in recognition as he saw Steven. Sir, I'm so sorry, he gasped. We didn't know you were here. If we'd realized. Steven lifted a hand gently. No apologies needed. I'm a guest here, same as anyone else. But the damage was done. The crowd now knew the truth. Security now knew the truth. Bo, finally, painfully, knew the truth. Steven Seagal wasn't just refusing to fight. He was demonstrating absolute mastery by choosing not to. The MMA coach stepped forward again. You challenged a man who could squash your attacks like dust. And instead of humiliating you, he chose restraint. That's the difference between ego and mastery. Bolo's shoulders deflated completely. He lowered his gaze, shame burning in his chest. I didn't know, he whispered. I thought you were just. Steven gently cut him off. You thought wrong. But acknowledging that is the start of learning. Bo blinked, stunned. You're not angry. Steven shook his head. A true martial artist doesn't hold grudges. We walk away with peace when possible. The crowd applauded loudly, cheers, whistles, respect-filled claps. Not for Bolo. For Steven. For his restraint. His dignity. His mastery. And Bolo Yeung, once towering in arrogance, now felt smaller than ever, not because Steven defeated him physically, but because Steven defeated him without needing to. News of the confrontation spread through the expo faster than wildfire. By the time Steven Seagal quietly stepped away from the center of the circle, hundreds of people had already uploaded clips online. Within minutes, those clips were racing across social media. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube Shorts, everywhere. One caption read, Bolo Yeung challenged Steven Seagal, and instantly regretted it. Another said, this is what real martial arts looks like. The videos exploded in views. Millions watched the moment Steven redirected Bolo's attack with ease. Millions more commented on how calm, composed, and controlled he remained throughout the entire confrontation. But what captured the world's heart wasn't the skill itself. It was Steven's restraint. In a time where everyone wants to prove their strength by being louder, tougher, more aggressive, Steven proved something entirely different. Real power is quiet. Real mastery is calm. Real warriors control themselves. Back in the hall, Yeung remained in the ring long after Steven had walked away. His fists were no longer clenched. His chest no longer puffed out. His arrogance had dissolved completely. He watched the crowd react with awe, not toward him, but toward the man he had tried to humiliate. Several young martial artists approached Bolo carefully, unsure if he was still angry. Instead, they found him silent, almost humbled. One of them whispered, Sir, you were brave to challenge him. Bolo shook his head. No, I was reckless. He looked down at his hands that had spent a lifetime building strength, discipline, and reputation. But today, he said quietly, I learned something I should have understood long ago. A young fan asked, What's that? Bolo sighed. That mastery isn't loud. And ego destroys everything. Meanwhile, Steven Seagal walked toward the exit with slow, steady steps, avoiding attention even as the crowd applauded him. People tried to shake his hand, thanking him for showing restraint instead of violence. Some even bowed to him out of respect. Steven simply nodded humbly. One reporter rushed up, breathless. Mr. Seagal, millions are watching the clip right now. Do you have a message for your fans? Steven paused at the door, looking back at the chaotic mix of awe, excitement, and reflection spreading across the expo hall. My message, he said calmly, is that martial arts should never be about proving superiority. It should be about understanding yourself and controlling what needs to be controlled. The reporter scribbled quickly. And what about Bolo Yeung? Any hard feelings? Steven shook his head. No enemies. He's a powerful fighter. He'll learn from this. We all grow. His voice carried warmth, not condescension. That clip alone went viral. People flooded the comments. This is what a real martial artist looks like. He didn't even flex, he educated. Beyond the Lookout got humbled with zero violence. Steven Seagal won without winning. Respect. 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 Meanwhile, Bolo watched the viral videos from backstage. At first, he felt shame. But the more he watched, the deeper his understanding grew. He hadn't been defeated by Steven Seagal. He had been reshaped. Later that day, Bolo approached Steven privately. No cameras. No crowd. No spotlight. He bowed, not dramatically, not for show, but sincerely. Thank you, he said quietly, for teaching me. Steven nodded. Discipline isn't a burden. It's freedom. Bolo smiled faintly. I see that now. They parted with mutual respect, a respect the world had not expected to witness. By nightfall, the confrontation was the top story across entertainment networks, sports channels, and martial arts communities worldwide. Analysts broke down Steven's wrist redirection technique. Instructors praised his restraint as the highest level of mastery. Millions of viewers commented with admiration. But the message that hit people the hardest was simple. Ego fights to be seen. Mastery doesn't need to. The final clip everyone shared was Steven's quiet line. Control yourself, and you've already won.